As early as 1933, the Nazis were already undertaking necessary measurements for the purpose of an upcoming war. 3 years later, in 1936, a plan was put into place. This precise plan of the army and the armaments factories had to be operational within a time frame of 4 years. Czechoslovakia and Austria were annexed, and in September 1939, Germany declared war on Poland. The government had also planned forced labor for the prisoners of war to benefit the German economy due to the men being conscripted into the army, leaving a deficit of the main workforce behind in the areas of agriculture, crafts, and industry. Stalag, an abbreviation of Stammlager, means in its literal translation, camp of origin. They were never intended to be concentration camps, with the ideological aim to exterminate its prisoners. The stalags were prisoner of war camps, situated all over Germany, such as Moosburg in Bavaria in the south of Germany. This photograph was taken in September 1939, in which representatives of the Munich authorities are discussing Moosburg as the choice of designated terrain, but they are not entirely convinced because the ground is deemed poor and liable to flooding. But they insisted on Munich for other reasons. Moosburg is located on the railway line Munich to Landshut, being much more practical for transportation purposes. Furthermore, the land is situated in the outskirts of the town, facilitating its surveillance, yet at the same time near enough to profit from the infrastructure of a town. On the map, you see the town of Moosburg surrounded by bodies of water, namely by the rivers Isar and Amper. Additionally, one can see the railway line with its bifurcation, first passing the barracks and after a further 300 meters reaching the camp, both of which are remote from the town. Here, you can see the camp's entrance with huts on both sides. The watchtower of the entranceway. This photo was taken from the top of the watchtower, and in it you can see the main road of the camp, and you begin to realize just how vast the area of this stalag stretched. It has become one of the biggest in Germany over the years. Originally meant to hold only 10,000 prisoners, at the end of the war there were over 70,000. In total, more than 150,000 soldiers were registered in the camp. As a comparison, the town of Moosburg was home to 6,000 inhabitants back then, and currently 18,000 people reside there. And here is the plan of the camp from the same focal point as the preceding photo, which shows the train station of Stalag on the bottom left, and just past the entrance on the left side, a large shed for storing wood, coal, and food supplies. Opposite, the barracks of the British and American soldiers. The prisoners were segregated according to nationality. The Russians were housed separately to the far right. You will see the explanations for this subsequently. Some huts were able to hold 400 prisoners, whilst others only half of that amount. At the top left, a hut is shown, which facilitated theatre performances and church services. The military and obligatory labor service of the Third Reich start construction of the camp, but just 3 weeks later the first load of 1,400 prisoners coming from Poland and Ukraine had already arrived. This incident evoked an increase in speed of putting up the tents. Step by step, the huts were constructed by the prisoners themselves. Here in the foreground the shacks which are being built, and in the background the tents. As you can see, the pathway of the camp was surrounded by barbed wire running along it and patrolled by guard dogs. In 1940, that which had been feared the most happened: flooding. Sometimes more than 1,000 new prisoners were transported daily by train to the camp. Here you can see a line of prisoners awaiting entrance to the interim center in order to be deloused and disinfected. It had been rapidly set up in an old chemical fertilizer factory. After these hygienical measures, they were brought to the main camp, where they had their weapons, money, and valuable objects confiscated, as well as any items considered dangerous or utilizable in an attempted escape. Setting up the camp was only one part of the operation. Above all, it had to also take care of long-term accommodation, supplies, and the disposal of waste products. In this photo, you can see a long line of merchants bringing supplies to the camp. 8 tons of bread and 30 tons of potatoes were consumed on a daily basis. The rations consisted of plain nourishment. Packages containing food commodities from back home, as well as the Red Cross, acted as important supplements and were vitally important in fighting starvation, especially towards the end of the war as the rations dramatically decreased. Individuals recruited to work as medical personnel in the infirmary were chosen from the detainees. Diseases and mild injuries were treated in the infirmaries, while severe cases were taken to the military hospital on site or to the one in Domberg in Freising. In this photo, the Polish laborers are portrayed in their assigned work commando. What kind of labor are they performing? There were individual commandos, where a single prisoner was appointed to an agricultural undertaking or a craft firm. Some commandos, however, consisted of up to several prisoners working in big industrial enterprises. There existed more than 250 commandos under Stalag's authority. Here are some Hindu workers. Behold, a French commando. The French were renowned for their vast knowledge in farming, resulting in most of them working on the farms and being housed there too. The prisoners received a small salary, with which they could use for obtaining goods at the respective stalag. They were also prohibited from conducting conversations with the German civilian population unless these were of a work-related nature. In total, nearly 72 peoples were represented. The majority of them were treated in accordance with the Geneva Conventions, just like the Americans or the British shown in these photos. The total number also consisted of soldiers hailing from the French and British colonies. Here, in conversation with a German officer, they exchange of friendly gestures. A prisoner from Sudan with filed down teeth into points, depicting a sign of identification towards one's tribe. Asia, again Asia, China, India, Australia, Croatia, Montenegro. The treatment of the prisoners varied accordingly to their nationality. The Russian prisoners here in this photo weren't treated in the same manner because this war was from the outset an ideological and racist war, with its roots in annihilating Bolshevism and the Jews. Jewish Bolsheviks were classed as being subhuman, and the Russian prisoners who had arrived to the camp before without force were treated accordingly. Some were then transferred onward to the concentration camps in Dachau and Buchenwald to be executed under orders of the Gestapo, the secret state police. We are now in the cemetery of Oberreit. Oberreit is a district situated around 5 kilometers southwest of Moosburg's town center. About 1,000 prisoners lost their lives in the camp. Of these 1,800 were of Russian nationality. Here, a few graves of French soldiers with crosses in much better condition than their Russian counterparts. Even after death, the inequality still persists. Despite censorship of the prisoners' letters and postcards, this was the only way to inform and keep in touch with their families. You can see a card of a prisoner to his family. It required many translators for monitoring the weekly batch of 140,000 incoming letters and packages and the 70,000 of outgoing post. The management staff of the camp had to invest immense efforts to bring the situation of the growing number of prisoners under control, despite the management trying to do all it could to render a bearable life for the incarcerated. For example, they were free to practice their own religion, a procession, or hear a burial following Hindu rites. German military pastoral assistants and imprisoned priests were responsible for the spiritual assistance of the prisoners in one of the barracks, which was temporarily reserved for that purpose. Everyday life at the camp was characterized by monotony, and so to break the routine, the camp authorities encouraged activities organized by the prison inmates themselves. Sporting events represented here, such as boxing or athletics, to name but a few. There were also cultural activities aimed at promoting an important intercultural exchange to ease the suffering in captivity. Here, a Polish theater group, a playing of Tibetan flutes, a British orchestra, an accordion player, Italian musicians. Here, scores which have been reserved up to now. Even a camp-run university was established by the detained. Here, a drawing by the English graphic designer and cartoonist Robert Royden Briggs. By the way, this illustration served as a model for the newly erected information board located at the former entry of the camp. Here, some of the artwork, which depicted daily life in the camp. Prisoners struggling with lice. Blacks. The hairdresser. A watchdog in action. Work at the camp. The tents in 1940. A drawing by Antonucci Volti, who was in fact a well-known French sculptor. He created several reliefs during his confinement, but we will return to him at a later stage. One of the reliefs by Volti. A few prisoners wrote during their imprisonment war diaries, which were handed to us throughout the years. One of a South African prisoner. The war diary of a British prisoner. That of an American prisoner. This photo shows how overcrowded the camp was. As the end of the war was approaching, more and more camps were liberated in relation to the advancement of the Allies through Germany. The Nazi leadership didn't want the prisoners to fall into the hands of the enemy, and as a result, the detainees underwent long marches towards the camps in the south of Germany, including the one in Moosburg. Finally, in April 1945, the camp was freed by the American troops. After the camp's liberation, it wasn't left unused, but transformed by the American military government into the civil internment camp number 6. Upwards of 10,000 officials of the Third Reich and alleged sympathizers of the Nazi regime were imprisoned there, up until 1948. From 1948 onwards, the camp served a different purpose. namely that of providing a new home for the expellees from Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Yugoslavia in the barracks of the former camp. In the years that followed, a new quarter was formed, today known as Moosburg Neustadt, as in Moosburg New Town. As you can see, the structure of the camp is even today still identifiable in the layout of the roads and of some of the buildings. After the Second World War, 2 places of remembrance were erected. In 1963, a fountain was built by putting together the sculptured reliefs from Volti we saw earlier on and placed in Neustadt. It bears the name Franzosenbrunnen, as in the French fountain. Here its opening ceremony in 1963. The other place is located in Oberreit, the former prisoner of war cemetery of Moosburg. In 1982, the local commune decided to purchase the land and erected a cross there, symbolizing peace and reconciliation. An association was founded at the beginning of 2014, its objective being to revive and help improve the perception of the Stalag's historical roots. It is therefore elaborated on a concept for completion of the already existing places of remembrance and organizing ceremonies and exhibitions. So far, it has realized a flyer in 6 languages, as well as a video presentation in 3 languages, and published a scientific documentation about the history of the camp. All of these projects are made possible with the collaboration of the municipality. On this map, the development of the town since 1945 becomes clear. Nowadays, the camp is fully integrated into the town. The new dwellers were largely involved in Moosburg's thriving development after the war. You can see the 3 places of remembrance. The newly inaugurated entrance of the camp, the Stalag Memorial Square, and the former prisoner of war cemetery of Oberreit. The map also includes the Museum of Local History, which displays numerous objects and testimonies from this era, notably this model of the camp. The first initiative of the newly founded association came about in the spring of 2014, with an exhibition about the music at the camp shown in the lobby of the House of Culture. The exposition carried the title Our Hope, the title of the original score of Jean Berguy, a French composer held captive at the camp. As the 75th anniversary of the camp's opening approached, the association took the initiative to refurbish the old cemetery of Oberreit. Here, an overview of the erstwhile cemetery after its recent renovation. On this occasion, a memorial stone, having sunk into oblivion, was restored and placed in the cemetery. This stone was sculpted by a Polish prisoner in memory of his buried comrades and a monumental mason in Moosburg. A tree was planted by representatives of the Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and Muslim religions in presence of around 200 guests. In 2015, marking the 70th anniversary of the camp's liberation, the association also organized a week of commemoration. This week began with an exhibit about the men in the camp. It consisted of photographs taken during wartime in the camp. During this week, an artist unveiled an installation representing the dead prisoners on the former cemetery of Oberreit. A musician, accompanied by a trumpet player, played the Signal of the Stalag, which was composed especially for this occasion. A delegation of the various veteran associations from the region flew their flags to pay homage to the fallen. Wreaths were arranged at the foot of the cross. The next day, the highlight of the anniversary week, numerous politicians and consuls of nations who stand for the prisoners of Stalag were invited. Here, the French consul in Munich engaged in conversation with his American counterpart, and in the center, the speaker. The public figures and inhabitants went in procession from the site of the Stalag's entrance to the square on which the French fountain is to be found. Red and white roses, the colors of Moosburg's emblem, were arranged by the participants at the foot of the newly installed information boards. An ensemble of wind instruments accompanied the ceremony. The mayoress of Moosburg, the American consul in Munich. Pupils from Moosburg who participated in a seminar about the Stalag cited in 6 languages. We commemorate the prisoners of the Stalag VII A because it is only by facing up to our past that we can shape a future of a united and peaceful Europe. Then they inaugurated with the mayoress the new square, which from then on was called the Stalag Memorial Square. In front of the French fountain. To round off these days of commemoration, a Polish bishop emeritus, who is strongly in favor of bringing the people and religions of this world closer together, signed the town's guest book. On that evening, he held a church service in the St. Pius Church in attendance of representatives of the Christian, Orthodox, and Islamic faiths. To conclude the annual cycle, an installation was organized and created by an artist. It bears the title 150,000, the particular number symbolizing how many prisoners the camp once encompassed. To conclude, information boards have been set up in front of the former camp's entrance, where you have a view of the main road. They were unveiled in April 2016 by a former prisoner of the Stalag VII A in Moosburg during his visit of the camp with his family. To round off this audio-visual presentation of Stalag's history, we present you with an extract taken from the diary of an American prisoner, Bob Jackson. Thursday, the 26th of April, I got 2 letters, and 2 days later I got 3 more from my darling Rien. It is wonderful to hear from her after so long a time. It makes me glad and sad. I'm even more thankful that this war is coming to an end, and I pray that we will soon be together again.